All right, guys, welcome to your next project. So I think you're going to enjoy this project because we haven't looked at hamburger menus or anything like that yet. And this is going to be a hamburger menu that's completely in CSS. Now, most of these things have JavaScript involved, and we're not going to do that. I'm going to show you a trick so that we don't even have to use JavaScript. But first, let's take a look at what we'll be building. Now, what you're seeing here, this little splash page with the image, this isn't really important to the project. We've done all this before. We're just going to add an overlay, an image, and use Flex to center it. What we're focusing on is this right here. This is a hamburger menu, and I believe it gets its name because it has the 3 lines that look like a hamburger. And I'm sure you've seen these before, where you click them and maybe something opens from the side or comes down, or you get an entire overlay like we're doing. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this. And notice that a couple things happen. So one, if we look at the hamburger menu itself, it turns into an X, which is really cool. And when we hover off of it and go back on, it kind of just goes back and forth, which is a neat effect. And then we get this entire menu overlay with some links here. So this is a really nice menu because it's completely responsive. It doesn't matter how big or small the screen size is, it's going to work, and you don't need any extra media queries or anything like we've been doing. And I built it in a way so that you can use this in other projects pretty easily. We're actually going to put all the menu CSS in its own file, in a file called menu.css. Now, let me explain how this is actually working without JavaScript, because usually what you would do is you would dynamically set a class in JavaScript, maybe like a show class or something, so that when you clicked, you had a JavaScript click event that would put in a show class or something like that. But we're not doing that. This is actually a checkbox. Okay, this is an HTML input with the type of checkbox, and with a checkbox you can style the checked state. Okay, when it's checked, you can add styles to that, and that's what we're doing. We're basically gonna get rid of the checkbox itself and replace it with this, but it still has a check state. So when I click it, we're actually checking it, and we can create all these styles. Basically, you choose to display this overlay, add transitions, transform, stuff like that, and then we can uncheck, and it goes away. All right, so this is something that is very useful, very unique. There's no JavaScript involved, so I think you guys will like this little project. Now we're going to start with just the HTML. I want to create all the HTML, which isn't much at all, and then just the base styles, so we get this image and stuff like that, all the stuff we've done already. And then in the next video, we'll start on the actual CSS for the menu. All right, so I have an empty folder called Hamburger Overlay Menu, and I'm going to, let me just make this smaller. We could probably make this a little smaller, because this is completely responsive, so it doesn't matter if we keep it small. But we're going to create a file called index.html, so let's go up here and let's create index.html, and then we're going to have a folder called CSS, and inside here let's create a style.css, and then like I said, I want all the menu stuff to be in its own file, so menu.css. And we're going to have one image, so we'll have a folder called img, and let me just grab that real quick. Now you guys can get this from the files in this lecture. You'll have all the completed files, and you can just take it from that. But let me see, let me just grab it real quick. Where is it? All right, so I'm going to just bring this in here. So there's our image. And now let's go into our index.html. And I'm just going to close up this sidebar. All right, so we'll call this hamburger menu overlay. And let's link in our style sheets. So we'll do link. We're going to have style.css. Actually, it's in CSS/style CSS. And then we also want to include our menu.css. All right, and it's up to you if you want to do this stuff, if you want to include multiple style sheets. If you have a ton of styling for one particular thing like we're doing here, then you may want to do it this way. Or you could just include it all in one. So let's start with let's take care of the HTML. So we're going to have a div here with the class of menu wrap. And inside here we want our input, and like I said, it's going to have a type of checkbox. Okay, we don't need a name and an ID. All we need is a class, and I'm going to call this class toggler. Okay, because that's what it is. It's going to toggle that overlay. And underneath that, we're going to have a div with the class of hamburger. And we're going to have an empty div in here. Now, the way that we're structuring this might look a little weird, but that's what we need to do in order to get the effect that we're going for. So we're going to have a class of menu underneath, and then a div, and then another div. And inside here will be the UL. Okay, so this will be our list. We'll have list item. Let's put an A tag. These aren't going to actually go anywhere. And I want to give you guys a challenge to turn this into a full website with what you've learned so far. I'm not going to go through it because I don't want to repeat stuff that we've already done and that we're going to do in the future, but it'd be a nice little challenge for you to create an actual site from this. I mean, obviously you could just point to about.html and also include the menu in that page as well. But we're going to just copy this down a couple times, and this next one, actually the top one, I'm going to make home. So home about, let's do services, doesn't really matter. Services, and let's do contact. Okay, so that's that. Let's save this and we'll open it with live server, and this is going to look very, oops, hold on, what's going on? I think I have something else open with live server. Let's see, I think I still have my news grid open. Yep, let me just close that up. Okay, so let's try that again. And there it is. So we just have a little checkbox here. So we're somehow going to turn this into this with CSS. That's how powerful it is, how powerful CSS is. Okay, so let's do the rest of the content. So under the last div, we'll create a header with the ID of showcase. And let's have a container, and let's also have a showcase dash container. We're going to use flex here to center everything. And let's put an H1, we'll just say welcome, and then a paragraph, we'll do like lorem 20. And then under the paragraph, let's put an A tag with the class of BTN. I realize I didn't have to do this part, but I'm doing it for two reasons. One, just so we have some things, just so it looks decent, and so that we can reiterate things that you've already learned. All right, so now let's go into our style.css and let's add our main styles. Now we're going to use variables here, so let's say in our root scope, we're going to have a primary color. And I'm going to use RGBA. Okay, remember RGBA is red, green, blue, alpha, so we can add transparency to the element using the color. Okay, so we're going to have 13, 110, 139, and then the opacity or the alpha will be 0.75. Okay, so it's going to be this color here, and it's going to be a little see-through. And we're also going to have a secondary color, which is going to be like an orange. So let's say secondary color. We're going to use that for the hover links. And that's going to be 229.148.0, and let's do an alpha of just 0.9. Okay, and then we're going to have an overlay color. So the overlay is going to be, actually, you know what? I should probably keep the file open, just so I can show you like what's what. So this right here, the background is going to be the overlay color. Yeah, that's going to be the overlay. So let's change this to overlay, and this is going to be 24. This is going to be pretty similar to the primary, but darker. So 24, 39, 51, and we're going to do 0.85. Okay, now if you want this to be less transparent, see how we can see the welcome behind it, you can just raise this up. Okay, you'll be able to just put this to maybe 95 or just 1 if you want it to be solid. But I like the see-through effect. All right, so that's our overlay color, and then last thing I want is the speed. Okay, how fast this actually opens. I want to put that in a variable so that it's easy to access. So let's say menu dash speed 0.75 seconds. And I know that this has to do with the menu, and this is style.css, but I didn't want to put separate variables in the menu CSS. We can actually use these variables in that file because we're including the style CSS before the menu, so we're able to use those variables. Okay, now let's add our reset. So we'll say margin 0. I always like to put a space there. Margin 0 and padding 0, and then let's do box sizing border box. For the body, we're going to use the Roboto font, so we have to grab that real quick. Let's go to Google Fonts, and Roboto I have right here. I'm just going to click that, and I'm going to grab, let's make this a little bigger. Okay, so I'm going to grab this link and put that in the index.html right above the style sheets. All right, so let's see, next thing in our style CSS, we want to add the font family, which is going to be Roboto sans serif, and then let's do a line height of 1.4. Okay, and then we have our container to move everything to the middle. So we're going to set a max width, and I'm going to do 960. And the reason I'm doing it so thin is because I don't want it to get in the way of the menu. I want the menu to always be outside of it. So even if we go like here, you can see that there's room here. So when we scroll down, the content will be, this won't cover the content basically. But you can experiment with it if you want. And that goes for any project. If you guys want to experiment with different values and do things a little differently, that's absolutely fine. In fact, I encourage that. So let's say margin auto, we want to push it to the middle. Overflow should be hidden. And let's add the padding. That's another thing that's going to push the content in. So let's do 0 top and bottom and 3 rem left and right. Okay, so if we save this, it's going to look like this for now. Now, let's see, what should we do next? Let's do the showcase. So showcase, and I'm going to do the background of the showcase as the primary color. So we'll put in our variable of primary color, and let's do color white. And we'll set the height to 100 viewport height, so I want to take up the whole page, and position relative. Okay, I'm doing position relative because we're going to use the before pseudo selector to add our overlay, and the overlay has to be position absolute. And remember, the position absolute is relative to its first relative container, which of course we want to be the showcase. If not, it will use the body as its container. So that's good. Let's save, and just you can pretty much completely ignore this whole part because we're going to be changing this. It's not going to display at first. We're going to add some CSS to hide it, and then it's only going to show when we click the hamburger, which right now is a checkbox. So let's go down here and say showcase before. And remember, if we use before or after, we need a content value, but we're not actually inserting content, so we just put nothing. And then the background URL. So the URL is going to be /img/showcase. We want to do no repeat, center, center slash cover as usual. And then again, like I said before, we want to position this absolute. We want it to start at the top 0 and left 0 corner and span all the way across and all the way up and down. So if we save that, we get our image. Now the image is covering everything, so let's set the z-index to -1 and save, and there we go. So now the image is behind the coloring. All right, and this is a little different than how we've done it before because we're using an RGBA value, and that is what this primary color right here. If I change this to 1 and save, it's going to be solid. So the transparency for the background image is controlled with this. If I do like 4 or 5, you'll see that it's lighter. So you can change it to how you want. Okay, and then the overlay is going to be the menu overlay transparency. So there's really 2 levels of transparency. So let's see. Let's make the showcase container a flex box so that we can center everything. So we'll say showcase container. We want to display flex and set the flex direction to column because we want this to go up and down. And we want to do all of our centering. So align items center. This should start to get drilled in your head. Justify content center and text align center. Okay, so that should put it in the middle. Now it's not down here because I haven't added the height. We have the height for the actual showcase, which is 100 viewports, but the showcase container, we need to set that to 100% of its parent. Okay, so we'll set height to 100% and save. And now that'll get pushed down. All right, so let's see, the H1, I want to make that bigger, so showcase H1. Let's set the font size to, let's do 4 rem. I think I did 3 on the other one, but I think it should be a little bigger. We should probably make the paragraph a little bigger as well. Showcase paragraph. Font size, we'll do 1.3 rem. All right, and then for the button, that'll be the last thing. Let's just do a class of btn. So the button, I'm gonna do our same rigmarole we've been doing. We want to display as inline block, and let's set the border to none. And the background, I'm actually going to use the primary color. And let's do color white. Let's do padding. So for the padding, we'll do 0.75 rem top and bottom, 1.5 rem left and right. And I just want to add a little margin top of 1 rem just to bring it down a little bit. And let's add a transition so that when we hover over it, it will kind of smoothly transition into the hover effect. So I'm going to say all 1 second, and we'll say ease in out. So save. There we go. And oh, the underline, let's get rid of that. Text decoration, none. All right, so now we're going to do the hover state. So button hover. And since we're using a variable where it could be any color, I'm just going to use opacity as the effect, and we'll do 0.7. So I'll save, and then when I hover over it, you'll see that it changes, and it does it nice and smooth because we added the transition. We could just do transition opacity. We don't need to do all. And there we go. All right, so that's going to be it for this whole showcase area. Everything we do from now on is going to be for the menu, and there's a lot of CSS. Now, having something like this is really cool. It looks really cool, but it is a lot of work. There's a lot of CSS that goes into doing something like this. All right, so we're going to jump into, and that's the reason I haven't created a hamburger menu on every project we've done, because it would just take up so much time. But I did want to include it in the course. So I'll see you in the next video.